Good afternoon, everybody. I know we stand here between you and lunch, but what I can assure you is that we will more than whet your appetite and make for a very interesting conversation for the next 1 hour. Century-old companies, be them General Electric, be them Ford, have built great businesses, but they do sound ancient when you compare them to some of the more modern upstarts, the likes of an Amazon, Google, Facebook. In fact, 9 out of the 10 Fortune 500 companies that were there 5 decades ago have either been acquired, have merged, have contracted, or they no longer exist in today. We're going to continue to see this pace of growth, and it's going to get faster as time progresses. So it definitely is a very interesting place that we're in at this point in time. How do you really sort of manage in an environment like this? What does it really need? Is it only about dynamism? Is it about innovation? Is it about your ability to adapt? The mantra is that if you don't become the disruptor, you will be disrupted. In fact, if you look closer home here in Asia, it is true as well. The businesses that have been built on the ground have been built by few very large conglomerates, and these businesses have been built with very valued brands. These businesses have been built over time, but the environment is changing. You have the demographics that are changing. You have a lot many more new tech and startups that are happening in over here. In fact, Asia accounted for approximately 50% of the IPOs in 2017. This is global IPOs. So you're clearly seeing a change in the demand, a change in the taste, and very importantly, you're seeing a change in the geopolitical as well as the local landscape. What is it that you need to do to be able to really adapt in an environment like this? The last day that you folks have attended, as well as the early morning and over here today, there's been a lot of talk about the US, there's been a lot of talk about China, about Europe, fleetingly about India, but very little has been spoken about the countries that these gentlemen really represent. You really haven't heard anything about the Philippines, you haven't really heard anything about Indonesia, you haven't heard anything about Myanmar, and you haven't really heard anything about Nepal, and like I said, very little about India. In fact, these countries represent, including India, 25% of the world population, a staggering 1.8 billion people. So I'm delighted that I have with us these 4 gentlemen who I'm just going to introduce shortly, and look forward to having a very engaging dialogue with them, which we're going to really sort of do in 2 parts. The first is really focusing in terms of understanding what has it taken them, how have they built these businesses over the generations, and the second over the decades, and the second is in terms of what is it that they need to do to be able to adapt and stay relevant in today's changing and evolving world. So to my extreme left, I have Jaime Ayala, who is the chairman and CEO of the Ayala Corporations, the leading conglomerate in the Philippines. The company was actually founded in 1834, so lots of rich history, and as a conglomerate, they are in different varied businesses, including the financial sector, including real estate, manufacturing, to just name a few. To my extreme left is Chairul Tanjung, who I'm going to fondly refer to as Pa Chairul. He founded in the 80s CT Global, a leading conglomerate in Indonesia, in the financial business, in retail, in food, in distribution, in media. To my extreme right is Binod Chaudhary, the icon from Nepal, who has diversified his business outside of Nepal to India, and is interestingly doing a lot more in Central Asia, another region that we really haven't spoken about in today. Again, financial services, hotels, retailing, and food. And to my immediate right is Serge Pun, who comes in from the fascinating country of Myanmar, who again runs the leading and founded the leading conglomerate on the ground in Myanmar, which has been there's a common theme, which is financial services. So all four of them are in the financial services business. Financial services, real estate, telecommunications. So four very interesting people that I have, and I'm going to really sort of kick this off and start with Binod. You have built a business, a small business that you inherited from your father at the age of 18. A small business, textile business out in Nepal, and to a huge conglomerate that you have in today. Talk us through what it took you to build this business, what are the challenges, and importantly, bring them into the relevant day of today.
Well, I mean, first of all, I must say that I was least prepared at the age of 18 to enter the world of business. Circumstances were such. I had to join my little family business. My grandfather used to import textile from India, which my father shifted to Japan and Korea, and that's how the journey began. Got bored, brought in the Suzuki car to Nepal first time, 42 years ago. Not even India had seen a Maruti by then. I think to cut it short, I mean, it's not easy when you start too young. People don't take you seriously, particularly when you have to represent a family and sort of work with the peer group of your father. And secondly, from a small country, often a country like Nepal is understood to be a country with the mountains and Sherpas and least for business. But in my case, that has been a huge advantage. The moment I give my card and say I'm from Nepal and Kathmandu is my home, the eyes pop out. And then that's when I get the attention. Mm-hmm. I think the life has been very challenging, but very promising, very happy one. I think today we own brands and operate in, as Rahul mentioned, in the hotel space, one of the largest partners of the Taj brand with over 12 hotels all over the world, ranging from Maldives, Sri Lanka, Dubai, Nepal, and Thailand in making. We are in banking, we are in noodle. We are very proud of a brand we own called YY, which has a 3% of the world market. It's an instant noodle, producing in India, Nepal, Belgrade, Kazakhstan, and now soon in Bangladesh. We surely intend to take it to the world. We are already doing so in terms of distribution. And we are in there for many other space as a player in startups. So whether to add to it, that we certainly are going to be the disruptors and not going to get disrupted.
Excellent, great. Serge, Myanmar. A lot is written, a lot is spoken, yet from the outside very little is known about the country in which you operate. You are the leading conglomerate. What's taken you and made you so successful there?
Well, thank you, Rahul. I want to thank Milken Institute for inviting me to this panel, but instead of talking about our success and so forth, actually, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk a bit about Myanmar. As Binod said, I mean, when he says that he's from Kathmandu and the eyes pop up, there used to be a time when all I have to say I'm from Myanmar and everybody say, oh, Aung San Suu Kyi. And we'll have a free ride for a long, long distance. That was very good. But lately, I think we've been in the news. We've been at the very, very sort of center of a lot of controversy. And there's been a lot of, I would say, negativism. I would categorize it that we're going through a fairly rough patch. But having said that, I think what is quite interesting is that you will see in the world basically two camps. One camp, which is predominantly from the West, which is very much focused on exemplifying or amplifying our failings, and basically, I don't know if I can use the word, trying to destroy what we're trying to build up. And in contrast, we have this part of the world, Asia, that has been very, very solidly behind Myanmar. Not that they agree with everything we have done, but that they believe that engaging Myanmar, understanding the complexity of Myanmar's problems, is a lot more constructive than bashing Myanmar and putting it down to a status where sanctions have been called for, et cetera, et cetera. And that is so typical of the world nowadays, where there's a lot of idealism, a lot of rhetoric, but it doesn't really bring the right results. We are in a situation where we need to uplift, a good 80% of our 55 million people out of poverty. We're in the process of a democracy which is so important for long-term sustainability, right? And these are the big issues which we are facing. And I would like to just advocate at this forum the idea that putting down Myanmar for whatever failings that our present government may have made in the last 2 years of the administration is really not the constructive way, okay? It is more required to engage them, to push them towards democracy or better government, rather than knocking them down. So that would be my message for today, if I may.
Great, thanks, Serge. I'm in fact going to put you a bit on the spot. This is just folks in the room. There's no media in over there. Nobody from sort of Myanmar on
There's a camera there.
for internal viewing, Serge. Now, you don't build a nation overnight. You don't build it in years. It takes you decades to build a nation.
True.
How would you look at the report card today?
Well,
Would it be an A plus? Would it be A minus, B plus? Where would you look at it? How would you?
Are you talking of the last 2 years, 2.5 years? Or are you talking of
the last
50 years?
The last 2.5 years.
The last 2.5 years, the report card is mixed. On the political and social front, I think it's got fairly high marks. There's a lot of work being done for the peace accord. There's a lot of work being done to social issues. Okay? So I would give it a fairly good high mark. Economically, unfortunately, the scorecard is dismal. Okay? I think what happened was that in the very beginning, the government was too concentrated on politics and social issues, and not realizing that the economy actually is just as important. So the economy went into the back burner until they realized, and the real changes actually has only occurred, I would say, 2 months ago, when they have a new chairman of the MIC, the Myanmar Investment Commission. Very refreshing. The refreshing thing is about the change of attitude, whereas in the past 2 years, I would think that the government's attitude was that come to Myanmar, we'll give you a favor of investing in Myanmar. Quite depressing. Okay? Today, it's the other way around. Please come to Myanmar. We need you. Right? And that fundamental change is going to make a lot of difference. Right? So economically, I think they have a lot of mileage to cover and to catch up. But overall, I think the talk now is upon democracy, upon some of the things that in the Rakhine state, some of the issues. But just in one sentence, I'd like to say that Rakhine has an issue. There's no doubt about it. But the Rakhine issue is a lot more complex than what people like to say. It's an issue that's been there for 100 years. It's an issue that is deep down between two ethnic groups. It's an issue, I must be honest to say, that caused and left behind by the British colonial masters. Okay? And we are trying to solve all these, right? So anybody who thinks that it will be solved very quickly, or that anybody, even our state consular, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, has got this magic wand to solve it, it's futile. It's a folly. It will not be solved that quickly, and it will take time.
Thanks. I think that was an A+ response, Serge. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let me move to my immediate left. Pak Khairul, Indonesia, 260 million people. Fascinating country. We're seeing what's happening in right now. Elections are going to be in April next year. Lots of noise that's happening in on the ground. You have, as a qualified dentist, been able to build a large conglomerate. I don't know how you got into the area that you're in right now. Would love to hear about your journey as well.
Yeah, I think, I'm starting when I'm first years in Faculty of Dentistry in one of the biggest university in the country. Yeah, I'm starting the business. Yeah, why? Because I have to fund it, my education by myself. Because I came from the ordinary family. Yeah, I have to do everything by myself. I'm starting from the informal business. What is the informal business? Everything I do by myself. That is informal business. I don't have employees. I don't have everything. Yeah. So moving from the campus, yeah, to after 4 years, I think I'm starting to small scale business. From collecting the money, I can make it one store. Still connecting in dentistry. Yeah. What I make it the medical and dental supply store. Yeah. So after that, I do everything. Contractor, buy, sell the car, used car, and whatever make money, I do it. Yeah. So that is the things what I do. Yeah, from the informal to small scale. What is the difference between the informal and small scale? I have employee. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's employee. So finally, I goes to become the medium enterprise. Yeah. What is different? I have a manager. Yeah. So after that, moving again to become big companies. Yeah. What is different? I have a director. Yeah. So after that, it's becoming conglomerate. What is the difference? I have a CEO. Yeah. So that is the journey I make it. Yeah, it's 37 years. Yeah, from starting to here. So what is this can be happen? Yeah, because I born in Indonesia. The countries with a lot of opportunity. Sorry to say, if I born in Singapore, 37 years after I doing the business, I can't do like that. Yeah. So that is the real situation. So the island with the countries with a lot of opportunity, young population, yeah, domestic consumption is huge. Yeah. So every year we make it one Singapore. Why? Because our growth rate is 1.6%. So multiple to 160 million. Every year we produce 4 million baby. So that is the grade of the country. So because of that, the journeys come. Yeah, I thank God. Yeah, I come to this level now. Yeah, I hope I still can contribute. Yeah, something the good things for my countries and also for the world.
I should have said up front, all 4 of them are very, very involved in philanthropy in their respective countries and within the region. So I think he's being clearly humble and over here. As much as he has the managers, the directors, the CEOs, the man starts his day at work at 10. He says he's not a morning person and goes to sleep at 3. He leaves his office after midnight. So that's the values in which you really build these large and sustaining conglomerates. Let's move over to you, Jaime. A very different story. A business that goes back in times, 1834. You became the chairman and the CEO of the business, and you've taken it to an absolutely different level. Different journeys that these three have had to follow to what you have had to follow. Was it easy? And if I may say so, was it easy being born with a silver spoon?
Well, let me just say that unlike Pacaro, I go back home early in the evening. But I do get up earlier than him. It's a different set of responsibilities. I think the stories of these three gentlemen are ones that I've admired, and we've known each other, I think, for a little while now and heard each other's stories. I think they each represent countries that are fascinating, each in their own way. And I love the story where people light up when they hear about your country, because it's absolutely true. You've got such a winning brand as a country. It's hard in Myanmar and Indonesia as well. It's a different story. We were a family partnership. It started very early on, and I think, as you point out, it was I had a very fortunate situation of inheriting an institution that was already had built a reputation and had built a history, I guess, in the country. But with that also comes a different set of responsibilities. As we all know in this room, institutions these days don't last very long. You build them up, and entrepreneurs can build very robust institutions, but a couple of generations down, most institutions don't succeed or don't exist anymore. And so the set of responsibilities of staying relevant, reinventing yourself, are a different set, but as heavy as I think as these three entrepreneurs had. It was a mixture of both luck and foresight. We've had a long history. I don't mean to go through the whole history of the company, but a big break really came out of all things at a terrible time, which was the Second World War. Manila was one of the most destroyed cities in the world. I think after Warsaw, they said the destruction there was very strong. And the center of gravity of the city, which was the older part of Manila, for those of you that know the city, was completely laid bare. I mean, there wasn't a single building standing. And we were fortunate to have a farm outside that, and the foresight of a great uncle of mine and my grandfather, who said, you know, there's an opportunity here to rebuild a new center of gravity for the city. It was a dream. There was nothing there. But because the rest had been flattened, there was a chance to build momentum in a new area. And that evolved into a new central business district, a new residential area. Values got created, and those values could then be parlayed into other businesses, and the business evolved again after that, at a time when there was just very little liquidity and really nothing much after the Second World War. But one story, maybe to pick up from Pacaro, is the whole issue of governance. When I analyze probably the biggest transition that took place in our institution, although there were some reinventions along the way, was really the time, and I think it's underestimated generally, when we turned from a partnership to a limited liability corporation. I've always been actually fascinated. You know, Ayala is just called Ayala now, but for a long time when I started working there, it was called Ayala Corporation. And I always asked myself, why is the word corporation so prominent in when a corporation is just a normal name of a limited liability institution? And when I looked into the history, it was that transition from being a partnership to a limited liability corporation in the very early 70s that transformed the company. It was done very deliberately at the time. Most institutions in our country were partnerships at the time. It was the standard form of organization, I guess, of a business entity. But by becoming a corporation, you could now attract securities, you could attract capital, and you could modernize the whole governance structure, as Pacaro was hinting at in his own institution. And that really led to a foundation of governance, of building credibility with financial institutions, with the banks, with the institutional investors, that led to a whole different dynamic in the institution, from a quiet partnership of well-respected individuals in my family to a more modern, professionally led institution. That period in the 70s, I think, marked a massive transformation, and it was this adjustment to global standards, to taking advantage of the burgeoning financial markets that were happening in Southeast Asia at the time that I think led to a massive transition into the institution we are now. And add to that a distinct separation of what was really a mixture of businesses around a real estate core after 1950, 1960, into a distinct character as an investment holding company with distinct businesses, each with their governance structures, each with their leadership teams, and then, of course, access to the capital markets and global governance standards. That really transformed the institution into a revitalized, self-aware, and growing company with all the wherewithal to really have the ammunition that it took to take it into the future. I think that would be a simple version, I guess, of the story.
Thanks, Jaime. I think you've heard the perspective of 4 people, 4 different countries as to how they have really built their businesses. Now you've heard the story really summarized. It hasn't been easy. As the saying goes, that the road to success and often the road to failure is often the same. How do you make sure that you really sort of stay on the path of the road to success? It's not easy when you're in these countries to be able to work the ecosystem. You've got an ever-evolving and changing local political landscape. So I'm going to really put a couple of you on the spot there and start with you, Pak Chairul. Indonesia, we know what the political system is all about. You have yet, over the years and decades, been able to survive that. What has been the secret of your success in being able to do so?
Yeah, I think is one of the key success of mine is actually the number one, we have to see the opportunity of the country itself. Yeah, so it's actually we starting the business is actually without have a plan in landscape. Yeah. Why? Because can you imagine from informal business, from small scale business, from medium enterprise, what you have? Knowledge? No way. Yeah. Research? No way. Yeah. So what you have? You have is only the guts, the spirit, hard workers, fighting. Yeah. So to make it something, yeah. But when you are becoming bigger, you already have resources about knowledge, already have resources about the information, already have resources connecting with the whatever the power. So starting of that, so in my case, I'm very strict. Yeah, I don't want to connect it with my business to the power. So I never have a business with the government. I never have a contract from the government. I never got the facility from the government. I never asking anything from government. Even I'm support the government. So whatever changing the power, it's never impacted my business. Why? Because my business is 100% is a free market. So that's very important in the countries, like Indonesia, India. Can you imagine if you affiliated to the powers change, you're gone. Yeah, if you got monopoly from this regime, it's actually the regime's change. It's actually your monopoly will be taken out and you will be collapsed. Something like that. So that is a very important, I think, in the basic principles of the business, whatever I have. The second is a very important because I know Indonesia is actually will becoming got what we call it democratic bonus. Yeah. What is the democratic bonus is actually the young population coming. They have a very good workforce. What is mean? They have an income. So the income is actually can using for the consuming or for saving. But Indonesia character is new rich people. What is the character of new rich people? They like to consuming compared than saving. So because of that, domestic consumption is actually rising.
We saw a bit of that in Crazy Rich Asians as well.
Yeah. So because of that, yeah, domestic consumption contribute almost 60% of the GDP in the country. So knowing that, we are very focused in the consumer business. whatever the people need about the goods and services, we try to provide. Before, of course, we never knows about the non-physically economy. Yeah, so we try to build all by physically economy. Yeah, so whatever is actually, we proud about that. More than 50% of Indonesian people will be our customer, or they will be connected one to others, whatever the service what our company make it. So because of that, we always enjoy whatever the situation. Yeah, whatever the perception, like Indonesian economic, now a lot of the people put it on the spot, but it's actually fundamentally is good. Yeah, it's actually, the growth of economic still more than 5%. The inflation still about 3%. Yeah, so debt to GDP ratio below 30%. Yeah, so just perception. But if you thinking about perception, you never do everything, right? So life have to be continuous. Business have to be running. Yeah. So if you correctly about the business, the sector, whatever you focus, is actually the situation of the countries is always create the opportunity. That is always the way what I'm thinking.
So a couple of things. So one is either with or without the government, you've been able to very effectively build a business based on the demographics, which has been a great story. Is that the same, Binod, in your experience as to how you've been able to do this? Some of you that may have been here last year, we had a very interesting conversation around the same subject. So I'd love to get
Well,
your
I
views.
do believe that, no matter how much we try to run away from politics, politics will never leave you alone, particularly in our part of the world. I think that doesn't mean that you're going to, take sides. I think you got to work with everybody. As Chairul mentioned, government come and go. You got to work with everyone. And particularly, in our case, a country which has been in a perpetual transition over the last 25 years, a swing from the monarchy to a republic, and in between 12 years of armed revolution led by the Maoist, and 26 government in 25 years. There is always a need to engage with the parties because they are essentially political activists. They've never run governments. They need to understand that how the world functions today. So I don't personally feel that there is anything wrong in engaging with them. And as a matter of fact, I think responsible citizens, responsible business houses, they need to work with the political parties without hurting their egos and bring in a sense of, the practical approach to doing things in a manner that is sustainable, which will lift the country. I totally believe that, however, you've got to insulate your business side of it separately. It has to function professionally on its own merits. Nepal we have today, and let me take a couple of moments to talk about my own country. Today, thankfully, all those issues are behind. We are a republic country. We have a new constitution. A new government has been elected. And today, the economic priorities are in the center stage of the country. And I think today is the time when the country is moving forward. Both China and India, both China and India has a huge interest in Nepal. I think it is becoming more and more visible in the region for drawing significant investments in the power sector, in the tourism sector, in the agro-processing sector. So I think this is the kind of a time when the government needs to put structures in place which are seen as being transparent, which meets the expectations of the investors community when you talk about predictability of policies and deliveries of this policy. Having said that, politics all over the world is same. When I was, just to pick up the point that you mentioned that during the last 2 days, none of us have seen any reference to the smaller countries which are growing, emerging, coming out with, respectable corporates, because I think I often, in my informal conversation, I'm giving an answer that, politics is an issue, okay? Predictability is an issue. We much rather prefer to focus in US or in Europe or in China to a certain extent or in Japan. So my point is, where is the politics of this step? I mean, where you see swing of a nature that I couldn't have imagined until 2 years ago in terms of the policy regimes of United States. I mean, United States has preached through the IMF and the World Bank the liberal form of market economy all their lives, even at a time to a small country like Nepal, to open up our market, demolish the tariff and non-tariff wall, and allow our industries to fight with China and India. And today, we all know what's happening in the United States, okay? So I think it's all relative. I think it's all moves according to the time and convenience. I think each country need to position themselves in a manner that suits their respective ground realities. I think that's the name of the game.
Great. I think this is a perfect segue to sort of move, and you spoke about US and China. So you've got really sort of two sort of giants, elephants that are sort of really at it, fighting and working and trying to agree on what the trade and how should that tariffs really play out. How does this really impact the folks that are sitting on the side? Are you net beneficiaries, or do you actually lose out on the current situation? So I'd love to start with you, Jaime.
Well, maybe let me take it one step back before we go to the current situation. I think countries like ours, the Philippines, have been a great beneficiary of an interconnected world. As the world moved into a more globalized environment, as people were allowed to move backwards and forwards, as ideas, technology, capital began to evolve, I like to think that the world grew across the board into a better place. I'm a great believer in the interconnectedness of countries. I'm a great believer in global trade. And I'm a great believer in countries like ours being able to attach themselves to this growing phenomenon. Our countrymen, on one hand, have been able to work and provide services around the world in ways that have brought back to the country tremendous amounts of capital. At the same time, the mirror image of that is the fact that the Philippines, I think after India, has really become one of the leading providers of business processing outsourcing in fairly sophisticated ways to the world. That evolution of telecommunication, interlinkages and services flowing and people flowing have been of great benefit. As you move to today, which is your question, you have China, which continues to promote this global atmosphere of trade and interconnectedness. And of course, the US now that at this period in time is beginning to close its doors a little bit. I think that obviously for us, China has been a big driver of demand for goods and services, and that's helped our export industry in a big way. But of course, the US also has been a great provider of technology and many new ways of doing things. I think at this point in time, an interconnected world and the promotion that is taking place among countries that still believe in open and productive trade between each other, I think is of great benefit to a country like ours. Whether the US continues to close its borders or not, I guess remains to be seen. It could be just part of a broader negotiation that's taking place to realign, I guess, balances in the global system. But I would hope over time that we go back to a free and open and encouraging environment of global trade, which I think really raises the levels for just about everyone in the world. And I think we've all benefited a great deal from it.
Excellent, thanks. Serge, your comments on that?
Well, I come from one of the smallest, in terms of the size of the economy, one of the last frontier markets. So we have a slightly different perspective. As you mentioned just now, what happens when two elephants start fighting, and are you going to be trampled or not? And my feeling is that you just climb up a tree and watch them fight. And that's the safest thing to do. And that's what I think we'll probably be doing. But coming back to the global situation and Asia as a whole, I think there are a few things that people might have missed. One is the rise of Asia. The rise of Asia is not in dispute. And this is a phenomenon, and this is an occurrence, a fact. Okay? A lot of people are still sort of in the mindset that Asia is not that important, America is more important, and Europe is more important, until they probably wake up one morning and say, we're wrong. Okay? There's one thing I'd like to share with everybody in this room, which I've done in the recent months. China has never had one import fair in the last 40 years of its opening up. China has always had an export fair, selling its goods to the world. Right? For the first time, China decides that this year in September, in Shanghai, they will have the first import fair. And the way they're doing this is sending even a delegation to a small country as Myanmar is, way back in February, to say, we have this fair in November. Would you please organize to come and show us what you can sell? We are in a buying mode. Come and sell whatever you have. The party leadership in the 19th Party Congress have announced and declared that over the next 5 years, they're going to spend 10 trillion renminbi on buying things. Now that's $1.5 trillion US dollars to be spent over 5 years. That's a lot of money. Something like 300 billion a year to buy. And when I look at Chinese moves, I always try to look at the strategic move behind it. And what I feel is this. You know, the One Belt and Road Initiative is a very strategic move, okay? It is like a repetition of the Marshall Plan, which put United States into the leadership role after World War II in Europe and in the world. And this Belt and Road Initiative is trying to do that for China, okay? Now, why is the United States so powerful? When the United States says, we're going to sanction you, Myanmar, we lost 3,000 factories. They had to move to Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, because anything we produce cannot be sold in the United States. Simple as that. Gone. Overnight. 600,000 people lost their jobs, factories closed. Because they have the buying power. They're the biggest buyer in the world. They might not consume it all themselves, although they try to portray that they do. They actually buy it and sell it to the world, a la iPhones, a la Nike shoes and Adidas shoes. They sell it to the world, but they're the buyers, right? In 5 years' time, I think with this strategic move of import fair, I think we would be afraid not to be able to sell to China, not being afraid not to be able to sell to America. And if that happens, I think the leadership fight for global leadership is over. And that's why people say, what do you think of the trade war? I like to say, God bless America. It's going to be a big fight, and we're going to be hurt in the process. But I would not put too much money on what America is doing at this moment, because I think it's irrational, it's self-hurting, it's really, it hasn't got any support from anybody I know, except from perhaps people in the what do you call that, Midwest, or redneck, or whatever you call it. The whole world doesn't support it. Huh? So that's my view.
Excellent. I see you're trying to jump into that, Binod. Else I'll have another question.
Sorry?
I said I thought you were wanting to jump into what Serge was saying.
No, I think
Okay.
he's articulated pretty well.
Very well. Okay, great. Excellent. So what is the trade war, the trade tariffs, right? You all have built businesses essentially which are very asset-rich businesses, and you alluded to that, as against businesses that have been built off an ecosystem. How do you continue to take your businesses forward in the manner that the world is evolving to today? You have built very good local brands, but you got the Nikes, you've got the Amazons, and you've got everyone coming in over here now to really come in and do things and disrupt your businesses. Would you really now be the disruptor? Would you be disrupted? Would this business die, or does it need to change, and how does it need to evolve? Chairul.
Yeah, I think its word is changed, especially in the last couple years. Yeah, I think is the changing of the word is because of two ways. One is because the demography changing. Yeah, the second is because of technology. So about the demography, yeah, like Indonesia examples, we have 260 million people. Now 100 million people is millennial generation. Yeah, the characteristic of the millennial, the lifestyle is different. Yeah, I like the traditional food. Yeah, my son, my daughter, they not eat the traditional food.
None of us really understand the millennials. Any millennials that are here, we don't get you.
Yeah, so that is the things, you know. I'm still watching television. Yeah, yeah. My son is not watching television anymore. Their life in the cell phone, yeah, and the computer. Yeah, we like to do something, connecting, yeah, by friendship. Is actually, if we have 100 friends, 1,000 friends, it's already so much. They have 1 million friends. Yeah. So we are doesn't want to sharing whatever is a private for us. Yeah, they every day is live. Yeah, to sharing whatever, they're happy, they are sad, they're crying. They're sharing to everybody. Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, whatever they eat, they take a photo sharing. Yeah, so that is happen. Yeah, word is changed, the lifestyle is changed. Yeah, it's because the demography. Can you imagine the numbers of millennial? Yeah, can growing and growing. And maybe the next 10 years is actually their number is more than us, the baby boomers and whatever the something is actually will be belong to the past. Yeah. So with this characteristic, this is also the challenge and opportunity to the business.
So what are you doing specifically, Chairul?
No,
in your business?
yeah, that is just one. And the second is about the technology. Yeah, it's about the demography, technology, lifestyle, and technology is actually changing about that. Now it's actually we have to adapt. Yeah, with the business whatever we do now. Yeah, so it's actually we running all the business. We build the business based on physically. Yeah, so what we have to do is actually the physically business what we do have to be convert to ready to digital. Yeah, that is will be good, frankly speaking, for us. First, we can make it what we call it the efficiency, because the numbers of people will be decreased dramatically. Business process will be very straight away, simple. Yeah, and also we can reduce the mistake. Yeah, the fraud will be decreased and so whatever. And the biggest challenge and opportunity of this is actually we will know our customer one by one by the database. Yeah, we understand because everything they're sharing, we will know, Rahul, with your consumption, with your communication in Facebook, with whatever your communication in Instagram, we will know how much your income. We will know what your hobby, yeah. We will know what you want trip for the next month. So after that, we can deliver to you whatever you need. So that is the way. So what is changed, we have to adapt with the business. So because of that, now it's actually a process for us how to make it our business based on physically and consumer to become is actually digitalized and connected to platform with the database. Because what will be changed, the biggest asset, the biggest valuable asset before is land, building, yeah, factories, whatever. The biggest valuation asset in the future is database. So that is the keyword. If we are not adapt, of course, yeah, we will gone. I want to sharing about one story.
Please.
Just 1 minute, very simple. Yeah, more than 10 years ago, yeah, I got opportunity to make it the special course education in Black Belt University in centers of education of GE in Carterfield, New York. In that time, GE is #1 companies in the world. Everybody, yeah, admires about the GE. Yeah, everybody admires about the Jack Welch, right? I go there and I got the training about more than 1 week there, and I have a vision. I want to become GE of Indonesia. Nowhere GE. Yeah, so that is mean no Amazon in that time. Yeah, can you imagine just more than 10 years, nobody to become more than 1 trillion market cap, and GE is the most admired and the most market cap in that time. Yeah, is actually go to nowhere. So that is just a good examples I always sharing to my employees about if you not adapt, yeah, we will go.
So we should make sure you don't attend Amazon's program in the US now.
Well, the only consolation is that, they tell us that we're all going to live above 100 years old. So for those who don't change, there's still some hope for some business, right? Because we'll be around for another, 40 years or so.
Then you've got to get into the healthcare business.
Right.
Okay, I know we've got the clock in over here. I'm going to ask one last question and then really open it up. If you were to start all over again in today's world, what is it that you would do different in building your businesses? So I'm going to start with you, Jaime.
Yeah. Well, I'll tackle it 2 ways. I think at this point in time, there are a lot of things that we've done well and maybe some of the things that we've missed on. I think we've set up, at least within our group, the kind of infrastructure necessary to transform, as Pakaru was saying, to adjust to this changing world. I think what I would have done probably a little bit earlier on is create a culture, both physically, formally, and informally, of innovation and understanding where innovation is going more formally. In the end, it's not just about technology, it's just not about the structures and the new ways of doing things. It's really about a culture of reinventing yourself on a regular basis. I think any institution that is able to self-reflect and adjust and change is really the survivor in the end. And if there's a legacy I'd like to leave in my institution, is one where people are comfortable looking at change, investing in change, even if there is some failure, and really becoming entrepreneurs in a way as a large institution in making sure that you have the ability to reinvent yourself. I think just one last comment on the shift of technology. I think that innovation culture is something we're trying to inculcate at lower levels, at middle levels, and at the highest level. But also, let's not forget that the winners in this technology space are actually very few. If you look at the big winners, we all named the same ones, yet a lot of people are putting capital into that space. I think just as interesting, and this is just a thought, are the externalities that form around these winning institutions. And what do I mean by that? You take, for example, the e-commerce space. In the Philippines, we're probably behind many parts of Asia in developing that space. And if you analyze why that's the case, it's not that the technology is not available, it is, but the whole logistical infrastructure necessary to deliver goods and services is really quite ancient. So we've decided, rather than, although we're investing in the technology itself and we've invested in the e-commerce space, we're also putting equal amounts of capital behind developing the externalities that will allow it to thrive, mainly the logistics space. So we started a logistics company from scratch and tried to use as much modern techniques, as much technology to basically move ahead of some of the traditional players in that space. So I guess my one lesson there is let's not forget the externalities that evolve around these new technology spaces, the new way consumers are reacting. They're just as important as the technology itself.
Excellent. Great. Binod, if you were 18 today, what would you do different?
No, I agree with Jaime. I think these are really very compelling times. The whole world is, going to be a different world. I think the way it's moving. Talk of the AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, the ramifications of artificial intelligence scare me, if you ask me. I mean, we're grown up with the culture of having infrastructure to produce, to deliver, and things are changing. I mean, these days, products are not going to change, consumers are not going to change, but how you reach out to them is going to change completely. And I think when 5 years ago, when our next generation came up to me and said that we want to start a startup venture fund, I said that was the most intelligent thing that they wanted to do, because I think there is someone somewhere in the world thinking about how they can produce the same product and deliver the same product at a much cheaper cost, okay, without me knowing it. So all our businesses are under threat. So are we part of that process, that exercise? If we are not, I think we have a danger of being irrelevant. I think we have to be part of it, and we are very much part of it. Give you an example. We are in banking. I mean, JP, you're in banking. I think the banks, the way we do banking is completely changed today. And we are using a disruptive model of telecom for transforming our banking. And I think that's what is the new form of the innovation that is going to trigger a new era of an ecosystem which is going to displace the rest of the traditional banking and telecom industry, where either you are part of it or you are out of it. I think that's it.
Got you. So in 1 minute, Serge.
I started my business some 35 years ago. If you ask me what would I do different, looking back, there's nothing I did that I can use today. Whatever I did 35 years ago is totally unsuitable for today.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think is permanent and can be used is the diligence I put in, the hard work I put in. But even that today, you got to be a little smarter, not just, pure hard work. You got to think a lot smarter when you do hard work. And that's about the only thing that I can use. The rest are all out the window.
Excellent.
So that's what I would say.
Thanks.
20 seconds only.
20 seconds, yeah. We're going to open it up to the floor.
I want to do the startup. You know why? Because, can you imagine? We don't need to make it a profit. The value is increasing dramatically. Yeah?
Well said.
So that is why I not make it, Now is I have to make it profit to make it a value. Yeah? If I doing startup, I don't need to make it a profit, I can creating a value.
Well said, guys.
Very good.
That's a good one.
So we literally have 1 minute. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay, I think the four of them have done a terrific job. All I can say is that Asia and the countries that they represent are in very safe and capable hands. With them, they're definitely going to be the disruptors and not be disrupted. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us.